You are viewing. Yes, please, everyone.
Good afternoon once again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for making time out to attend this webinar hosted by ISOC Nigeria chapter. My name is Boye Adegoke, chapter president. I have with me Mrs. Bukola Fawole-Oronti. We'll be moderating together.
Good afternoon, everyone.
So I will just give a very short, we've got a very excellent panel here, people who know what they're talking about when they're talking about access and civil digital rights and all of that. So I wouldn't go into too much detail. There's a lot to learn from them. Thank you very much, our panelists, for making it here even at such short notice. It shows how passionate you are about the subject matter and generally about the well-being of the people. So we'll be talking about internet shutdowns. For those of us who are from Nigeria, you know that we have elections coming up and there have been rumors of shutdowns. And as most of us know, shutdowns happen when you need the internet the most, when you need the internet access for communication, for activism, for education. And it's best. We've been fortunate in Nigeria that we've not seen any widespread internet shutdown. Some will even think that we don't have any. We've never had internet shutdowns in Nigeria, but others will tell you that there have been pockets of partial outage from time to time, depending on what those in power think necessary. So we thought we should have this engagement, figure out what we can do. Unfortunately, we don't have anybody from government here at this time. It's a sensitive period and I don't think anybody wants to speak officially, but the good thing is that this session will be recorded and whatever the insights that we share here will be passed on to people in positions of authority so that they can get educated a little more about the importance of the internet to all of us. So without further ado, I will hand over to Bukola to introduce we'll have a short presentation. After that, panel session in which we'll get to interact with the speakers, with the panelists. Thank you very much. I hope it's a very fruitful week for you. Over to you, Bukola.
Oh, thank you, Boye. Good afternoon, everyone, once again. And I'm happy to be here with every one of us. And we are honored as Internet Society that you're able to make this time with us. Right now, I'll be handing over the mic back to Boye to give us the opening remarks. And immediately after Boye, Chuks Okoriekwe, I hope you're on standby, so you'll be taking over from Boye. Immediately after that, I'll be moderating a panel session alongside Boye. I'll be having 8 panelists. And of course, after that, we'll take some questions from the floor. Then we'll have response from the panelists before we go to the announcements, closing remarks, and vote of thanks. And of course, the discussion as usual continues on Telegram and on Connect. So back to you, Boye.
Okay, thank you very much, Bukola, for handing the mic right back to me after I thought I had done it in 2 minutes as assigned. But one thing that I failed to mention earlier is that during the course of the call, we'll be taking comments. There's a chat window there in Zoom. We'll be taking comments from the floor, and we'll try as much as possible during what is supposed to be the question and answer session after the panel session is done. We'll try as much as possible to have the panelists help us address the different issues raised by participants in the chat. Would have liked to give everyone a chance to speak in person. to manage the time better, I think it'll be faster for us to type whatever contributions or questions we have as the session goes along. So the objectives, as stated here, are to help sensitize us about the implications of the shutdowns across Africa. We have panelists and participants from other African countries, some who've had the unpleasant experience of internet shutdowns. We share their experiences as well. And we'll also try and see what policies we have in place and how can we guarantee access to an open internet. Very importantly, we should figure out how to engage all stakeholders, both state and non-state actors, to ensure that the internet remains open and accessible to everyone. We should have Chuks Okoriekwe here, and then he can go ahead with this presentation so that we can take that and go into the panel sessions. We will do that in less than 10 minutes. Thank you, Chuks.
Hello, Chuks. Kindly unmute your mic.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chuks Okoriekwe, legal practitioner based in Lagos, Nigeria, and I'll be happy to take us through a very short presentation. My slides are... Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Caleb. Can I share my screen from here?
No, Caleb will be handling that. So just
okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Again, the topic for our short discourse this afternoon is centered around internet as a force for social good, ending internet shutdown. Just like the one rightly said, Nigeria is currently at a season of elections, and there have been rumors that the government might shut down the internet so as to prevent the spread of fake election results. Although the Office of the National Security Advisor, which is in charge of the internet architecture, internet infrastructure in Nigeria, has more or less dispelled this rumor. But again, we must also state categorically clear at the beginning of this session that the webinar particularly is not meant to, in a way, antagonize the government on whatever it is that they are up to, but a way to sensitize Nigerians as to what they need to do in case the internet shutdown, as rumored, eventually occurs. My presentation will be taking us in three parts. The first part will be on the internet economy. The second part will be looking at the internet as a catalyst for fake news, hate speech, or accountability. And the third part will be on right to access to internet, interrogating the question whether there is indeed a right to access to internet in Nigeria. It will be apposite to start with a quote from Bill Gates. Bill Gates says, the internet is becoming the town square for the global village of tomorrow. Understandably, virtually everything that happens today has to one way or the other, has the involvement of the internet in it. Now, looking at the internet economy generally can be seen as, our economic, social, and cultural activities supported by the internet and related information and communication technologies. We've seen instances of this has been referred to as the fourth industrial revolution, where virtually everything that is done today has an interaction with digital technologies. I'll say, for instance, we have artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the likes. Now, running through, this is a stat that shows how the world has grown to rely heavily on internet architecture. Say, for instance, about 55% of the global population rely on internet for their daily need, while about 36.1% have access to internet in Africa. Now, we must also state categorically clear here that we need to onboard more people to the internet in Africa. Looking at the fact that we have so many issues which the internet could help resolve. Say, for instance, issues with good governance, issues with access to health, and of course, issues with access to information. Now, like I said earlier, looking at this particular stat again, about 4.1 billion people used the internet on a particular day, that is 7th of February 2019, which again underscores the fact that the internet is a global force. Virtually everyone, or almost everyone, rely on it for one thing or the other. Next slide, please. However, there are instances where there might be shutdown, which of course brings us to the question whether the internet is, a catalyst for fake news, hate speech, or accountability. You would recall that even lately, the federal government has moved heavily on issues of fake news and hate speech, to the extent that even WhatsApp now advertises on newspapers and billboards to sensitize people on how to distinguish fake news and, of course, hate speech. Now, looking at internet shutdown, AccessNow defines internet shutdown as an intentional disruption of the internet or mobile application in a bid to control what people say or see. Now, it could also be referred to as blackout or key switches. Now, looking at the categories of internet shutdown, we have the total shutdown, whereby the old internet architecture is switched off. We also have a partial shutdown, whereby access to certain content of the internet is restricted. However, it should also be stated also that this could either be intentional or unintentional shutdown. This is a quick research carried out by IEEE Internet Policy Center, which practically shows the restriction of some certain content in the Nigerian cyberspace. As you can see here, anything that has to do with Biafra has been restricted because, of course, the government considers Biafra as a threat to national security, thereby blocking content that relates to such issues and discourse. Moving on, there are also international conventions that more or less supports right to access to internet, one of which is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 19, and of course, Article 19 of the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, all talking about right to freedom of expression. And we know that the internet has provided a platform where people can expressly, express themselves to the full extent. However, there are regulations that could impede such free access to expression. Okay, next slide, please. Like I said, the internet has more or less democratized access to information. And this has played a key role, go back please. This has played a key role in encouraging people to advocate for good governance. We can see what happened in Cameroon, at the Anglophone side of Cameroon. We can see what happened in Libya, Egypt, Tunisia, and several other parts of the world, which has, of course, prompted reactions likewise. Next slide, please. And that, of course, brings us to the question of how government has reacted to the democratization of access to information. Usually, or in most cases, the government actually orders a shutdown, and this is usually hinged on the issue of national security, to protect national security as a basis for ordering internet shutdown. Government demands for shutdown, and then of course it leads to several social effects. Next slide, please. This also brings us to a pertinent question. Does the Nigerian Constitution guarantee a right to the internet? A multi-million-dollar question, if I may ask. Next one. Now, unlike countries such as Finland, Estonia, Spain, Greece, and Costa Rica, where basic internet access is part of the citizens' fundamental rights, Nigeria is yet to include access to internet as a fundamental right. This means that we cannot approach the court, for instance, to say, oh, my lord, my right to access to internet has been infringed upon. Definitely, one cannot get recourse where such happens. However, there is currently the Digital Rights and Freedoms Bill, which is before the president, and we hope and anticipate that it is signed in earnest, as it would more or less guarantee rights of access to the internet. And of course, we must also say that these rights are not absolute, as the government could, through substantial grounds, derogate from these rights. Now, the right that is protected under Nigeria's constitution, which relates to the internet, is the right to freedom of expression and the press, as contained in Section 39, 1 and 2 of the Nigerian Constitution. Now, I cited a case here, Badejo and Federal Ministry of Education. The case is instructive as it tells us that the court only recognizes or enforces the right as stated in the Constitution. So the right to access to internet, not having been stated as a right in the Constitution, is somewhat not guaranteed or protected by the courts. Of course, there are grounds for derogation. The government can derogate from right to expression and the press if on the grounds of interest of defense, public safety, public order, public morality, or public health. In the same vein, government has also made some specific laws which seek to regulate the use of the internet, some of which include the Cyber Crimes Act, the NIDA framework and guidelines for public internet access, the National Broadband Policy, NCC's Draft Internet Code of Practice. All these regulations, more or less, these laws and regulations, more or less, limit or try to create a framework within which one can have access to the internet. And there's a query. I said, what is the impact of these legislations on access to and expression to the internet? Can this constitute a basis for internet shutdown? Next slide, please. Obviously, yes, taking a look at the Cyber Crimes Act. The Cyber Crimes Act, looking at Section 33, verse 3, sub 1, more or less puts the National Security Advisor in a position where he or she may recommend to the president to designate certain infrastructure as critical national infrastructure, in which the president can then thereafter make regulations on how to prevent access to such infrastructure. Next slide, please.
Hello, Mr. Chuks, you have a minute to go.
Okay, okay, next slide basically talks about, of course, we looked at the fact that the government can derogate on some of these rights. So let's quickly look at what we can do or when these rights have been infringed on. That's towards the end of the presentation because of time, for want of time, just so. Next slide, please. Next slide. Now, this talks about the cost of internet shutdown. If the internet is shut down, Nigeria will be losing about $6 billion per day if YouTube is shut down. If access to YouTube is shut down or restricted for a particular day, we will lose about more than $6 billion. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, yeah, this talks about the Zimbabwean case where the government ordered for internet shutdown and it was challenged in court by civil society groups. And of course, the court ordered that the ISP should switch the internet back on. Now, available options if internet is restricted in Nigeria, we said we will need to dialogue or have engagement with government agencies, including the ONSA, NIDA, MBC, to engage them to know, to also educate them on the implications of internet shutdown. And of course, we also have by adopting legislations to protect the right to internet access, one of which is before the president for his assent. Then we have all forms of public engagement, and of course, one of which is eventually to approach the courts to ask the courts for an order for the government to restore internet. On the final note, if internet is restricted, if internet access is restricted, there are a couple of tools which one could use to bypass such restrictions. Some of which have been outlined here. We have Tor, Siphon, Obot, Tails, Lantern, FireChat. Also, we also provided the links for a possible download. For those who want to download it, they could click on the links and have them downloaded. I guess that's all, and then I'm available to take any questions from us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chuks. So
Thank
to all our audience, the slides you just presented will be available on the website. So you can visit it later after this meeting, and of course you have access to it to know more. And of course, this information will be there too. So if there's need for you to contact him. Thank you very much once again, Chuks.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Now I want to invite all our panelists, and I believe we have them all ready with us now. First of all, I'll be introducing Madam Nnenna Nwakanma of Web Foundation. She is the policy director in the interim at the foundation. Next, I'll be introducing Reverend Sunday Folayan. Sorry, Madam Nnenna, are you there? Can you please unmute your mic and say hello to us? Hello?
I am. Hello.
Okay.
I think we should just keep the can you please keep the introduction thing? People can go online and type our names on Google and get information about us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Reverend Sunday Folayan, Berhan, and Boye Adegoke.
I second Nnenna. Just keep the intros out. Let's go into the discussions.
Okay. So I'll be starting the discussion with Reverend Sunday Folayan. And the question is, what are the roles of ISPs, CCTLDs, and all the likes, and state and non-state actors on the case of internet shutdown? Briefly in a minute.
Thank you very much, Bukola. Before I answer your question, let me first correct a statement that Chuks made, which is not actually correct. The Office of the National Security Advisor in Nigeria is not in charge of internet architecture in Nigeria. But the Office of the National Security Advisor is one of the agencies of government that can disrupt the use of the internet in Nigeria. I think it's only fair to recognize them as having that capability, but not to put them in charge of internet architecture in Nigeria. They are not. On to the question that has been asked by Bukola. Internet shutdown is not just all about activating a big kill switch somewhere. Shutdown can happen because the dictator has induced a shutdown, or can indeed ask operators, the telcos and the ISPs, to shut down their service because of state security. It could also happen because of denial of service that may be activated by hackers and malware and other things on the internet. And if an internet service provider is not clued enough to know how to evade these type of things, it will lead to a shutdown. And those type of shutdowns can be very, very expensive. A case in point was when the Pakistani telecoms some few years ago tried to prevent people from going on the net to search on Google. They ended up advertising the Google BGP address block wrongly on the internet, and the entire Google traffic was redirected to Pakistan until people figured out what was going on the internet, and this was resolved. The last possibility is that it is possible for the network to be wrongly scoped or wrongly provisioned. And a case in point was of that of an African country that tried to use a central system to collate election results some years ago. And the file system on which the results would go to was just 50 megabytes. But from each polling station was coming data that was up to 1 megabyte. And that means that if all this data arrives on the server, by the time 50 polling stations reported their data, the disk ran out of space and there was total shutdown of the election collation result. This is as a result of wrong scoping. So all these are possibilities of shutdown. And you can see that some of them are occasioned by the ISP either not doing the right thing or not being sufficiently clued on what is to be done. Let me take a sip of water at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sunday. Now to Madam Nnenna. The question is, African Declaration on Internet Rights and Freedom. Of course, there is a declaration and there are sanctions in place for defaulting members. The question is, what are the sanctions and how are they to be, what's the plan on how they are to be implemented in Africa and of course in ECOWAS?
Thanks, everyone. Thank you for having me. Are you speaking about the declaration that was started by civil society?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I just wanted to be sure because I was one of those who drafted that and still working on it. As an intro, let me say that when we think of the internet, we must always think global. We must also always think the 7.8 billion world population. That is very important because thinking of internet as a Nigerian thing, as an African thing, sometimes does not give you the global perspective that you need. The second thing I want to submit is that almost every single government on the planet has a legal provision somewhere where they may interfere in telecommunications. I have researched almost all governments. They always have that either in their constitution for defense, as the original presenter said, for security or one of these. But they always have a law somewhere that gives them that power. So we must be informed of that when we want to mobilize either as citizens or as companies or as stakeholders. Now to the declarations and sanctions. There is no global legal instrument against shutdowns. I'll take that again. There is not a single global instrument against shutdowns. We have the Declaration of Human Rights. That was the basis of the UN to which countries sign up to. That is to say, these are your rights. It does not have sanctions and all of that. As at last year, the United Nations Secretary General has put up a panel on digital cooperation that is going to write a report that will be presented to the UN Secretary General, that will be presented to member states, and on and on and on and on. That's the classic United Nations thing. But the sorry thing is that the UN is made up of members. So ultimately, never think as a Nigerian that some UN somebody is going to come to dictate to the Nigerian legislators what will happen. It doesn't happen in international relations. Every nation is sovereign and they will use their own laws to govern themselves. At the AU level, the same thing operates. We know that we have supranational at the AU level conventions. Yes. Hello? Oh, sorry. Okay, so we know that we have these conventions at the AU level or at ECOWAS level, but they will still need to be domesticated as law. And the fact that country X has signed up to something does not really mean that they will keep up to it at home. So it is very important that we keep that in our mind. Now to the declaration you asked me about. This is a declaration that was started by a coalition of non-governmental organizations. They do not have legal power in front of any government. We encourage the best we have done so far is to mainstream these into bills in countries, and Nigeria is a case in point. The bill that has gone to the Nigerian president for assent, I was one of the co-drafters. I contributed to it. That is the best you can do with an international instrument. Mainstream it to a national instrument and let the country sign it, own it as their own national law. Based on that national law, then you can bring matters to the fore. So simply put, you cannot sanction a government, you cannot sanction a sovereign nation except for the laws to which it has agreed that it will be governed by and governed with. In the case of internet shutdown, you see that a government, a politically motivated internet shutdown, like Sunday has explained to us, while the government might bring in the security argument, then citizens might want to bring in the right. So it's a right and security kind of thing. While they might want to talk about defense, you might want talk about the digital economy. So it's an ongoing discussion. My last word on this one would be that anyone who's talking about regulating the internet, I hear that bullshit all the time. You have to be very careful. Governments alone do not control the internet, nor does the civil society, nor does one platform or another. It is a new reality of multi-stakeholders, of multi-actors. And if anyone wants to really do something on the internet, you really have to open up to other actors, other stakeholders. At the Web Foundation, we have launched the contract for the web. It's not something we can do alone. We reach out to other stakeholders. France has adopted it, Germany has adopted it, Ghana has adopted it, but then it is not enough. So my last word will be, the internet has a lot of actors, a lot of stakeholders, and a lot of interest at stake. So be careful, be open, and be collaborative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Nnenna, for that enlightenment. And for now, we realize there's no sanction, but we are only trying to encourage member states to adopt the declaration. Now the next question goes to Berhan. Berhan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, thank you very much. Now the question is, as a passionate advocate for internet, keep it on, hashtag keep it on, what are your experiences in African countries that you're taking your campaign to?
Sure. Thank you for having me, everybody. My name is Berhan. I lead the Keep It On campaign at AccessNow. So the Keep It On campaign, just to give you a very brief background, has over 178 organizations that work around the clock in a coalition to fight against internet shutdown. So looking at what our experience has been in the African continent, the way 2019 started has been quite difficult for many of us. It started with DRC shutting down the internet for over 20 days. It started with Zimbabwe shutting down the internet for over 7 days. And then, of course, Gabon.
1 second, Berhan. Please, can people who are not speaking mute their mics? Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna assume people have muted and continue. So Gabon had shut down the internet for over 24 hours. So it's been a tough 2019. And of course, looking out of the African continent, Venezuela, India, and many other have also shut down the internet. So what our experience has been is that in terms of, like, for instance, in DRC, there was complete shutdown, including SMS, and even international SMS was blocked. So that was quite extreme. For 20 days, no one had any connection to the World Wide Web. And even further, I think that for the DRC context, mesh networks and local community networks were also asked to shut down their connections as well. So that was one of the most extreme that we've seen in 2019. Bringing this conversation back to the Nigerian context and sort of the threat that Nigeria faces as you guys go through your election is it's this localized forms of shutdowns that would be very difficult to document. So you have 36 states, over 84 million voters that are going to be dispersed in many parts of the country. And what would be super difficult to document is, for instance, if the internet is slowed down, if the shutdowns are contextualized. So when we're talking about it being contextualized, if for someone in Kanu or some really small city, if their internet is shut down, or if they're not able to access Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, or if their internet is really slowed down, that is super localized to that specific context, and it's very difficult to monitor and to document those shutdowns. So for me and our experience from Keep It On, what we've seen and what we continue to see is the increasing use of throttling or slowing down the bandwidth or localized shutdowns. We've seen, for instance, in Pakistan where certain neighborhoods in Islamabad don't have mobile internet or mobile network for 3 hours or 2 hours, or certain websites would be blocked in very specific locations, or the mobile service provider you have and the arrangement and they have will also depend on that. So in terms of Keep It On, that's some of the things that we're really worried about in terms of looking at Nigeria in the next few days. And also what is a bit scary for me as the person that does this work is we'll be missing many shutdowns if the shutdowns are going to be very localized. So that's some of the threats that we're trying to mitigate for as we sit here. And of course, pushing back more, I think it's important to empower folks that are on the ground to be able to download VPNs before the elections come, before shutdowns happen, so that they're able to download apps like Uni so that they can test and run their own tests to see what their context looks like. I think that would be really important as we look up to Nigeria in the next few days. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Berhan. My next question goes to Boye Adegoke of Paradigm Initiative. Now, Boye, as a digital rights advocate, and of course we have seen in the last few days that Paradigm Initiative, they are the key actor behind the digital rights bill that has been recently passed by the National Assembly, which has been forwarded to the President for assent. Now, I want you to briefly explain to Nigerians, how does the passage of this bill affect us as Nigerians? Of what good or what use is it to us?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking me to speak on this webinar. And also to everybody that has spoken before me, thank you. A lot of insight from your submissions. So, just like Nnenna mentioned when she was speaking, there is just so much that you can do to prevent an internet shutdown, because almost every country has that provision somewhere that you can leverage on to shut down the internet or to restrict access to the internet. And for those who have been following what is happening in Nigeria, you would recall that the president at the NBA conference once said that national security is more important than the rule of law. So when you have when people occupy, when power speaks that way, then you know that nothing is impossible. So with regards to the Digital Rights and Freedom Bill, it's good that we have drafted that bill and that we're trying to create a framework. We're trying to make it almost impossible for there to be an internet shutdown. But the significance of that bill is only to the extent that you are trying to build an ecosystem whereby it becomes increasingly difficult to contemplate shutting down the internet. Because, for example, the bill has provision in clause 14 that speaks a lot to how government should not restrict access to the internet and leveraging on international human rights principles. Yeah, but to put it very frankly, it's just to say that the whole idea is just to build that ecosystem, to have, for example, frameworks that speak directly to the issue. I'm not going to be overly optimistic. Even if the Digital Rights and Freedom Bill is signed, it doesn't mean that we cannot still be having this conversation. But what it's going to mean is that we are building our legislative framework in such a way that we are promoting positive legislation that discourages such action. And we are also trying to create a system whereby it becomes increasingly difficult and almost impossible for such to be contemplated. So, what I'm trying to say is that the bill is not a kill switch. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution to the problem or or panacea to the threats of internet shutdown. It's just that it is going to help a lot in terms of creating an ecosystem whereby you are promoting positive use of the internet, you are promoting positive legislation that speaks to people's rights to access the internet. As we have now, the president has not signed the bill, but we hope he's going to sign the bill. But if he does sign the bill, what it means is that at least it is going to be easier, for example, to even seek redress in case the internet is shut down, to be able to rely on such law to hold government accountable, and even for the telecom operators to be able to ask for damages in terms of money lost during the shutdown. The more you have this kind of things in place, the more it becomes difficult for there to be a shutdown. But lastly, before I stop talking, what I also want to talk about is that the work that needs to be done in terms of advocacy is not just with regards to the field. We have to do a lot of work in terms of changing attitudes, having an ecosystem whereby you have a lot of people who have positive disposition towards the use of the internet. And that's why training and retraining is very important. And when I talk about training, I'm talking about training for stakeholders, government stakeholders, people in government, people who make these decisions, trying to change their orientation towards the internet. Because where all of this comes from is because we are being ruled by people who are used to traditional approach to governance, whereby you can send, for example, you can send the police, the military to close down a newspaper house, the way it used to be done. So that is the kind of thinking that fits into the digital age why people contemplate the idea of shutting down the internet. So yes, a very wonderful step, the Digital Rights and Freedom Bill. We are going to do everything to make sure the president signs the bill. But come on, I don't want to over-raise your expectation. I want us to know that it is just a positive step, a step in the right direction. It doesn't remove or eliminate the threats of an internet shutdown. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Boye. My next question goes to Lisa. Lisa, can you please share with us your experience in Cameroon on the issue of internet shutdown?
Hello.
Hello, who's on with you?
I'm Lisa from Zimbabwe.
Oh, sorry, please. Sorry for the mix-up. Yes, please. What's your experience like in Zimbabwe?
That's okay. All right, so I'm just gonna talk about the recent shutdown, which happened in mid-January. It happened on the 15th of January and the week that followed that. So the shutdown was as a result of violent protests that were occurring in the country soon after an announcement of a fuel price hike. So people were angry, and generally the state of the economy was not pleasing, so people decided to do protests. So because of that, the government decided to shut down the internet, as what has been discussed earlier, that it's a security issue. And they stated that the internet was causing the spread of fake news, the spread of violent extremism, etc. So it was, first of all, the impact that it had on me personally was depression and many other people, because we are living in a world where the internet has become a currency. The internet it's what we use every day. So not having it was really depressing and agitating, I must say. And I will dwell much on the economic impacts that it had on local businesses in Zimbabwe. So what the state of the banking system in Zimbabwe is that it's highly digital, meaning cash we don't normally use cash to do transactions. We use swiping cards, and we use mobile money, etc. So because the internet was shut, it meant that we couldn't use point of sale for buying goods and services. We couldn't use our online banking system to pay for example, electricity tokens. That was very complicated and extremely negatively impacting the economy and the companies that benefit from these transactions. Also, I know of people who actually missed deadlines, because there are people who do online courses, there are people who are applying for certain opportunities outside Zimbabwe or within Zimbabwe, and that really negatively affected them because they could not finish whatever they were doing on the internet during that period of time. So another issue that I will talk about is that it's then affected also local businesses that use the internet as, which, for example, social media-based businesses, they were really affected by this lack of internet. And ultimately, there was an issue that was raised, an issue of privacy and security, because when we look at, as a response to the shutdown, people had downloaded the VPNs, right? And because people are not educated enough, they downloaded any type of VPN. So there are some VPNs that are not very good because they give access to malicious softwares and give access, and then also data, they can steal your data. So because of that, it exposed people to malicious VPNs that might not be okay. But actually, people were able to use VPNs to access social media sites which were blocked. However, the issue of a VPN did not work on some of the days because there was a total shutdown. So it did not work on those days. So that was the experience that we had. It was it had so much negative impact on the economy, on local businesses, and also on the social well-being of the country. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lisa. Wow, that's not a good experience anyway. So before we leave that, I'll also invite Kathleen. Can you please share your experience in Cameroon on internet shutdown? Kathleen, you're on. Can you please unmute your mic so that we can hear you? Okay, well, while we're waiting, let me invite Salvation Alibor. Now from the perspective of ISPs, can you please tell us what ISPs do in the area of censorship and filtering of content? Salvation. Hello, Salvation, are we there?
Okay, looks like we don't have Salvation online. He was online earlier.
He was online, yeah, okay. Okay, so is Tomiwa there? Tomiwa Ilori?
Hi.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Now, my question to you as a policy analyst is on the issue of hate speech and fake news. You know, it's a common thing. The government will give an excuse why we are switching off the internet is because of fake news, hate speech. Now, my question is, how do you think the government can engage various stakeholders in order to curb this without having to resort to flipping the switch on the internet?
Okay, thank you so much for the question and for having me on the webinar. So basically, I think it's very important to draw the distinction between hate speech and fake news. Fake news is not an offense. Hate speech is, internationally and nationally. Now, with respect to the kind of collaborations that the government can look forward to in engaging these issues, is like, I want you to kindly maybe go back a little bit to what Nnenna said earlier on. Hello, what did you say?
If you are not having the floor, kindly mute your mic. So, Tomiwa, please go on.
Okay, thank you. So, with respect to what Nnenna said earlier, the idea of whatever goes on the internet, it's not the prerogative of just one actor. So when we are dealing with the dynamics that comes with the internet as a product or being used by consumers, like folks on the internet, we need to avert our mind to the fact that it's more, we should have more of a multi-stakeholder approach, a user-centric approach, as compared to the controlling idea that the state needs to be at the center of, of everything. So with respect to, I'd like to pick fake news first. In dealing with government, especially with respect to platforms, majorly Facebook, Google, WhatsApp, what have you, it is important that, like I said earlier when I started, fake news is not a crime, right? And in dealing with something you cannot put sanction on, you need to be very careful, because dealing with fake news, there are very, very high chances that when it is high-handed meaning government wanting to clamp down on fake news, I mean, that's usually the excuse. You will hurt free speech most likely when you want to make regulations or what have you on fake news. It is that dynamic because it is not criminalized, it's not an offense. So you have a very, very tough job wanting to criminalize. So what the government can do is that work together with platforms, ensure that there is a community-based guideline that is enforced based on outputs from most sectors of the society. So in making that happen, you will have to ensure that most stakeholders in the sector are brought to the table to discuss. It's not a government thing. I need to sound that note. It is not a government thing to regulate Facebook, and you can't really regulate Facebook. And one other thing again is this. Governments in India, in most countries across, even in the US, you hear them pushing the blame to platforms like Facebook, outsourcing individual responsibilities to platforms and tech companies. That is not supposed to be so. It's a social phenomenon, and when we outsource our responsibilities as individuals, as the public to these tech platforms, we will have what is going on in terms of censorship on these platforms, where machines dictate what human beings say. That's not supposed to be so. So, in working together with ISPs, working together with the private sector, we need to be able to come up with a perspective that mirrors the concerns of most stakeholders in the sector. So when you're regulating for fake news, you are not regulating based on the perspective of the government, but you are coming together to see how things can work and, reduce the effect of fake news. Fake news is not new. It's as old as man. People spread news deliberately or not deliberately. It happens. So criminalizing it or looking to want to use internet shutdown as an excuse does not necessarily help. It wouldn't help in any way. Now, quickly to hate speech. Hate speech in international law, in national laws, is a criminal offense. So there's always an element of violence associated with hate speech. So, and it has to be such speech that is used to incite violence, and it doesn't necessarily occur online alone, where you see bullying of all kinds. It can also translate to offline harm or offline violence, where you see certain people or individuals advocating violence against some sect or some people based on their race, sex, and all of that. So, in curbing hate speech, like I said, with respect to fake news, the categorization is different. One is a crime, one isn't. And due to the age of technologies, hate speech seems to spread faster. What I would say in dealing with fake news, with hate speech in this regard, would be government, like I said earlier, work together in a multi-stakeholder perspective and see how hate speech can also be co-managed. Underline the word co-managed. Because, what did you say?
No, I just wanted to round up briefly concerning this.
Okay, sure. I'll do that briefly. So, in essence, there is a need for a multi-stakeholder dialogue, right? That could happen with respect to ensuring that fake news and hate speech are not used as reasons to shut down the internet. And one very good example of such multi-stakeholder dialogue is the Digital Rights and Freedom Bill, which is currently before the president, and which is a poster legislation, a poster policy solution to all other African and the global community as a whole with respect to these issues in the digital world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tomiwa. Nnenna, please, I wanted to talk briefly concerning the issue of fake news. What's the global view on, Nnenna is off, okay. So, Berhan, can you talk briefly on the issue of fake news?
I'm here, people.
Sure. Please talk briefly on that, fake news.
Should I go on? Let Berhan go first.
Okay, let's go first, then Nnenna, you come up after her.
Yeah, so the issue of fake news as it relates to, I think, internet shutdowns is really important to look at in this context. I do disagree with our previous speaker that, yes, fake news is increasingly becoming criminalized. So it's not just hate speech that governments are legislating for. I think that's important to note. And then there's also this point that you specifically made that, platforms should not be held liable. Fake news is as old as man. Yes, that's true. But in the way that, the new technology has garnered fake news, and the way that fake news really travels very quickly has put a lot of people in danger, including, I'm sure you're familiar with the situation in Nigeria, Myanmar, and other places where India, where, violence and fake news go together. So I think it's really important that we also hold, platforms accountable to some of the actions that happen within their platforms. And, a social media platform should not be perpetuating genocide or that kind of violence. So those two things I think are really important to stress in this conversation. But one other thing is that, of course, governments increasingly use fake news, hate speech, and misinformation as a scapegoat to shut down the internet, and that's not acceptable. We should definitely have that conversation further so that we find alternatives to shutting down the internet when you're really dealing with issues of fake news and misinformation. So I think those two things are very super important to note in this context, especially.
Thank you very much, Berhan. So, Madam Nnenna, you have the floor.
Okay, a quick one.
Yes.
In every country, false information is liable. That is a fake offense. It's a clean offense. So fake news is an offense in all countries. You don't need a new law for that. False information is a criminal offense. I think it's very important that we clear that out of the way. During the chat, I had given you a background to what is now known as fake news, right? I think that we understand what the digital economy is. Thank you. The digital economy is the economy of masses, is the economy of numbers. So fake news started from the media itself, when people would just throw out a fake information just to draw people to their platform. So it was basically to draw people, clickbait, we call them, because for you to be able to sell to advertisers, you needed to tell them that 100,000 people visit our website per day. For media to be able to maintain that 100,000 visiting their website per day, and so be able to sell advert spaces based on that, they needed to throw out these messages that are false, fake news, just to draw in the numbers. And now everyone has got into it. People want buzz. People want to be followed on Twitter. People want to be followed on Instagram, on Facebook. They want likes. So they throw out shit that is not true. And that's how we're all getting into it. So listen, the idea of responsibility, do we have rights? I hope I'm not going to shock people. My role as a policy person is to tell you how things get to be where they are. All stakeholders have responsibilities. We have rights. We all benefit from the internet, right? So when we have a global good, it means that we all have to take care of it. And if you're sitting down there as civil society, thinking that you will just get up and say, this person is gay, or this person has been caught, and use someone's head or your enemy's head to put on the body of someone having sex with another man and publish it on the web and think that it's a joke. Guy, you deserve a jail term. I don't care who you are. And by the way, a parliamentarian in Cote d'Ivoire has gone to jail because of publishing. What did he publish? He tweeted that the prosecutor has organized the arrest of someone else. And at the time he was tweeting that person was not under arrest. That parliamentarian, I'm talking about a parliamentarian, The honorable parliamentarian has gone to jail for it. Only yesterday he was given a suspended sentence so he could go home, but he took 6 months. I'm talking about Cote d'Ivoire. So please, let's in as much as we want to advocate for rights, let's advocate for responsibility as well. And that is what the contract for the web is doing. You can't just advocate for rights alone. Rights are balanced by responsibilities, both on the part of government, private sector, and civil society. I want to pay homage to someone like Sunday, who understands that as much as we don't hear the private sector enough, they have licenses, they have a charter of the services they give, and in return the things they have to obey. So my point here is that rights are good, responsibilities are the other side of it, and at every point in time we must balance this. Fake news is wrong, fake news is illegal, fake news is an offense. And if we really want an internet that will be of opportunity to everyone, we must all, even as civil society, combat fake news, please, because the government will use it to block the internet as a reason to order shutdowns, and then we all suffer from it. So it's very important that we have a balanced view and a balanced attitude and a responsible engagement in our online activities. I'm done.
Thank you very much for that enlightenment. And my next question goes to Mr. Reverend Sunday Folayan. On this ISPs being mandated to shut down the internet by different governments, the question is, can this ISP say no and back out of such an instruction, or they are just incapacitated, they just have to carry it out? They honorable were saying no, it can't be done.
Okay, thank you, Buki. Before I answer the question, let me also join Nnenna to correct that assertion that Tomiwa made, that fake news is not a crime. Fake news is criminal, and every society that wants to progress should not allow fake news in the wild. Until it happens to you, you will not know how bad it is. But we have seen people commit suicide because someone accused them of rape, even when it was not true. So as much as possible, let us balance responsibility and rights. On to the question that you have asked, which is that are ISPs mandated to shut down when dictators ask them to shut down? I think the answer is not too difficult. If somebody walks into a room with a gun and says, speak or die, leave and you are safe, are you going to start talking because you are so good at talking? I'm sure it's not the right thing to do. ISPs are licensed by governments, and part of the conditions is to obey requests from governments. So of course, when dictators make these requests, ISPs have to comply. Even the toughest of providers have had to do business in jurisdictions that are very, very restrictive. I'm trying not to mention names here, but you will know that such providers try as much as possible to meet the terms in those jurisdictions. As much as ISPs also have responsibilities to states, it's also important to state clearly that ISPs also have responsibilities to their country. I want to differentiate between the government and the country, because the government is not the country. Any government that is against its own people is not for the people, and therefore is an enemy of the people. So when an ISP operating in a jurisdiction that the government has gone rogue is confronted with having to toe the line of a dictator, oh yes, they may be very, very creative in the way they do things. There has been situations where ISPs actually shut down and are seen to have shut down, but what they shut down is their backup link or their main link, and their backup link is still up for some discerning people to use. As one of my co-panelists also mentioned, even if there's a partial shutdown, maybe, for example, you shut down HTTP access on port 80, people can still use VPNs to go out. People can still use VPNs to use their WhatsApp, even if WhatsApp is blocked. But it's going to be done by those who know what to do and know how to keep short. You don't keep going about that, yes, we found a back door with which to stay connected when a dictator has shut down. I am praying and I sincerely believe that we will never have a rogue government in Nigeria again. But if indeed there's a government that goes rogue on the people, there are enough knowledgeable people in the country who understand how to keep communication going. In as much as it is for the people, by the people, for the good of the people, no rogue government can take over our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Sunday. So, Salvation, are you online now? Salvation Alibor?
I am.
Oh, thank you very much. Welcome back. Now the question goes to you from the perspective of an ISP, of ISPs. Can you please tell us what do ISPs do in terms of censorship, filtering of content and the like? Then usually when they're doing this, is there a strict order for such to be carried out? Or is there a court order or just someone saying do this and it's done? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the organizers for having me and thank my co-panelists. I've actually learned a lot listening to this discussion today. Okay.
Can you please speak up a little more? Thank you.
Okay. Before I answer that, I actually want to point out some other facts that shutdown. It's just that here we're looking at it from the political angle so much. Okay, as someone who is responsible for infrastructure, who serves just as a toll gate manager, irrespective of what's going through it, we look at it not just from the political sides. Okay, so sometimes shutdown is ethical. Okay, at other times shutdown could just be technical. Okay, like I think in Nigeria, for example, we've had a partial shutdowns of time and again when some undersea cables supplying us goes down and we're forced to use something small. And so some persons are forced to cut down on the resources they give.
Hello, is Salvation still there or there's a disconnection?
Out. And so an amount of or outrightly disconnected. Okay, so in such cases, shutdown is necessitated by technical reasons. Okay, and there's been in some cases where ISPs operating in a locality are asked to power down. You know, maybe power down your base station or shut down your connectivity because the local government in that area is trying to manage situation, especially in elections. Okay, I've had that experience some time ago when a state was having a by-election. Okay, and they were saying to power down some of the base stations around. Okay, to avoid persons hoodlums being able to communicate among themselves. Okay. To us, the way it was communicated was not in a harsh tone that says, okay, shut down, or like Reverend SF put it, shut down or your life. Okay, it wasn't a shut down your life. It was more like, look at the situation. Some folks are using this, okay, to perpetuate criminal activities. Okay, so why don't you just shut down till we're able to get to their location so they cannot communicate among themselves? Okay, now in shutting down, you could either just power down your infrastructure in that location, or in a case where it is a case of censorship or filtering access. Okay, let's say for a campus environment, for example, where the school says, okay, yeah, we only just want access for our students to study. Okay, so we just want access for e-learning materials and XYZ, and then to the school portal system, and that's all. Okay, we don't want access to other things. Softwares are just used to restrict access in that case. Okay, so you just allow certain access to certain resources that are approved by the management, and then block every other thing. Okay, in some cases it's just to manage resources. Okay, where an enterprise says during peak periods, some folks just use up the internet resource to do other trivial things, and then for those people who wanted it for valuable reasons, they are not able to communicate faster or attend to the task at hand. So for such reason, restrict access, okay, on to only corporate resources until after a while, okay, and then they say, okay, from 6, 7, 8, you could just open it up for them to do every other thing. Okay, so in such cases, we still use just some communication tools, some network management tools to just allocate what resource they can access and what is not allowed to go through. Okay, so okay, that's about it. Okay, I just wanted to really establish that yes, I do appreciate that this discussion is really tilted towards the politically motivated shutdowns. But however, for a service provider, you may look at it from the point of view that shutdowns are not always a terrible thing. Okay, sometimes it's to control, to enforce law, to control those who use it, and to ensure that things don't go out of hand. All right, so in such cases, we wouldn't just blacklist shutdowns. Okay, and in some cases also, shutdowns are purely technical. And in that case, I also want to point out that Nigeria is such a blessed country where internet really has a multi-corridor, multi-pathway, multi-access. So we're not like some countries where access is solely provided by government managed agency, that a dictator can wake up one day and just say shut, just powers down. Okay. Hello.
Hello. Thank you very much, Salvation.
All right. Thank you.
Tomiwa, I noticed your hand has been up. Do you have something to add? Tomiwa, Ilori, you have the floor.
Hello.
Yeah, hello. We can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. It's just to quickly respond to, and thank you, Nnenna and Sunday, for the contributions. I'll quickly come back to that, but to quickly respond to Berhan on responsibility of platforms in, the spread of spread of speech, whether fake news or hate speech. I would like to also point out that while these platforms are responsible, which I agree with you, there is also the idea of intermediary liability, which in strict sense, they cannot be really held liable for. So that is that part on holding platform responsible. I think it has to be a little bit more, we have to be a little bit more circumspect in approaching that question on platform spreading hate speech and fake news. And quickly also to the idea of criminalization of fake news. I quite agree also with Sunday, like I said earlier, and Nnenna. But my point of view, which I shared earlier by saying that it's not a crime, is looking at it from the perspective of free speech and press. For example, if we continue to categorize, especially maybe a certain form of news from a certain channel as fake news, what impact will it have on speech? I agree completely with the idea of responsibility, which is very, very important. Why I said earlier that we don't need to outsource our individual responsibilities to tech platforms and all of that. But at the same time, what implication categorizing news or fake news in quotes have on journalism, press, and free speech. That was what informed my idea of not wanting to call it a crime per se, because for me, that would be adding to the arsenal of the government in wanting to regulate and control the free speech debate. The fake news debate. Thank you so much.
Hello, thank you so much, Tomiwa, for the clarification.
Yeah.
Now, I know we asked quite a lot of questions in the chat room. So, Dewale, can you please come up and with the questions so that our panelists can answer them quickly, because our time is up already, almost up.
Okay, thank you very much, Bukola. There are a number of questions here. I will just quickly run through them, and then if any of our panelists would wish to grab one or two of them to answer, we would, and hopefully we can take the chat transcripts and continue the conversation, because we don't want to keep you much longer than we said we would. Abdul Hakim Ajijola is asking for collective views on federal and state dichotomy. I know that you've probably been able to read the questions on the chat, and it's just saying Kogi State recently shut down communications, including internet access for its residents, and by implications, other states whose backbone passes through Kogi. Does the state have a right to tamper with the internet? Is there any does a subnational unit have the right to deprive other subnational units of internet access? And then talks about the Italian cyber weaponry firm hacking team, and it was reported that governors purchased advanced digital interception and hacking tools. I think it's just asking for views on that. That if those are true, do states have the right to purchase such advanced digital interception and hacking tools? Would such purchases by state chief executives contravene the Cyber Crimes Prohibition Act? We have a question from Morufu Amusa, which asks that where are the figures for internet users in Nigeria, Africa, Global? I'm sure we can point you to a link for that later. Ufa Mode is asking about the effect of internet stakeholders on internet shutdowns. We often discuss situations where shutdowns are caused by government activities. Are there other situations as a result of activities from other stakeholder groups? I think Salvation talked about some cases within service provision. I'm not sure that I got all the questions, but if we have anyone who wants to answer this from the panel.
This is Berhan. I can take the last one. So there are cases where the internet is shut down with, by accident. For instance, the small island country Tonga had its submarine cables destroyed a few weeks ago, and they were out of internet for 2 weeks. They don't know what happened. Might have been a ship cut through it. So there are cases, and in Haiti, we know some of the communication infrastructure was destroyed. So that's by some non-government actor groups that were pissed off at the service provider. And we know, for instance, in South Africa, a lot of times the towers are attacked. So yeah, there are contexts where it's not deliberate, or when it's deliberate, it's not specifically governments. We know in the Cameroon context, in the northwest and southwest regions of the country, some parts still don't have internet, and it's because some of the spaces were bombed. It's a conflict region. We know in Yemen, Libya, and Syria that those are really common, where it's not government actors, but some local warlords that are just turning off the internet or destroying infrastructure. So that happens a lot.
Okay, thank you, Brian. The additional questions here, Benjamin is asking, what about selective shutdown of websites, especially the ones citizens or maybe the community to one community? To chip in there, Nnenna, were you going to take something?
Yes, I actually was.
Okay, please go ahead.
Because I have two questions and I need to log off now. I have to go somewhere else. You have to look at the laws. That's what I said in the beginning. Nigeria is a federal government. I think that some states have some autonomy, and it would depend on, of course, the state governor I know controls the police to some level and has some level of security that is devolved to the state authority. So maybe it's on that basis and based on whatever terms of reference that was in the license given to an operator. So you need to look at all of that because they have to build on something to be able to make a request, okay? But I want to end with intermediary liability. So someone talked about intermediary liability. And because most people here are Nigerians, I think you know that famous saying that waiting concern Agbero with overload. The Agbero is like Agbero in Nigeria is a coxer. He's the one that says, come and enter this bus, come and enter this bus. And he's paid based on the number of passengers he can direct to a bus. Overload is the content, right? Agbero is not concerned with overload. His own is just bring clients. Once the client takes a ticket, he is paid based on the number of people he can bring in. Is that correct? Everybody knows that. So an intermediary does not have oversight on content or something. So you have intermediary liability is like quarreling with an Agbero because someone has overload. The people who are handling load will take care of that. Agbero is just to bring the person to the bus. So for you to be able to hold a platform liable, you actually have to determine what is the role that they play. Okay, in many cases you have takedown orders. You have people who say shut down social media. If you shut down social media, people will find another platform. They will find another way of giving out their information. So shutting down Facebook does not solve the problem of a dictatorial government. The problem is that you do not respect your citizens. You do not take care of them. You do not do good governance. So shutting down the platform that allows citizens to voice their opinions will not solve the problem of bad governance. So look inside and solve what the problem is. So on intermediary liability, we have to know whose mandate is being discussed and what are the clear responsibilities before you can blame people or sue them or call on their responsibilities. Thank you very much for having me. I have a great day, and I understand there's a rumor, I don't know if it's confirmed, that it is St. Valentine's Day today. Just in case that happens to be true, happy Valentine, everyone. Cheers.
Happy Valentine's Day, Nina. Thank you so much.
Okay, hello. I don't know if I'm coming to answer some questions. This is Alibor.
Okay.
Yeah, Boye, please go ahead.
Okay. First, I want to talk about the person that asked about the hacking team and what transpired in some states in Nigeria, how some governors were alleged to be using technology to monitor their political opponents. Yeah, so, it's about leveraging on lacuna that exists in.
Sorry, can you please speak up?
Okay, so it's about leveraging on the gaps that exist within the system. So the background to that is that there was a time when Nigeria still has problem with kidnapping. So when kidnapping was a serious issue in the South, a lot of the equipment were built primarily for the purpose of addressing the problem of kidnapping, to be able to track down kidnappers and all of that. But those things happen in the absence of the regulatory frameworks on how those equipment were supposed to be handled. So a lot of governors leveraged that, and they were using those equipment to monitor their political opponents. But the bigger issue is that nobody called that activity to question. Nobody went to court. Nobody went to challenge it, because it was something I worked on. Paradigm worked on it at that particular point in time. I don't agree that it is not legal. Nnenna was speaking the other time about what power the state has, for example, to shut down the communication base of a service provider. As far as I understand, Nigeria we have federating units, but I know that telecommunication is regulating the telecommunication industry is happened centrally by the NCC. We don't have a state equivalent of the NCC, for example. There are other issues that comes up in terms of enforcement of, for example, taxes, because that particular instance was a case of the government of Kogi State talking about that they were supposed to be paid some taxes and all of that. But also, if you look at the Cyber Crimes Act, some things have been designated as critical national infrastructure. I think the person who made the presentation also made reference to it. And when whatever telecommunication facilities falls under this kind of national critical national infrastructure. It is not inappropriate for states to shut down critical infrastructure like that, because what is interesting is also that that infrastructure is not just serving Kogi State, because it's serving even neighboring states. So I think on the part of the telecommunication company, they have a duty to take the state government to court and test the law. Even now with the Digital Rights and Freedom Bill that's going to provide some frameworks that's going to be able to be like digital rights and freedom, if passed into law, has some provisions that will ensure that we don't indiscriminately, for example, tamper with internet access, censor websites and all of that. But even with that, it doesn't mean that people will not try to do it. It doesn't mean that some government will not do it. It doesn't mean that some states will not do it. What needs to happen is that there has to be a response if it happens. Response in terms of testing the law in the law court and getting redress. The important thing is that opportunity to seek redress when it happens. And I'm aware that the company that was affected by that, by what happened in Kogi State, has gone to court to seek redress, which I think is the best way to respond to such situation. I think
thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. So Reverend Sunday, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we're looking at issues in a very imperfect system. If the system was perfect, these are not issues that we will discuss. When a state decided to shut down the services of telecom providers, they didn't go to activate a switch somewhere. They just prevented the telecom technicians from accessing their sites. For me, this is very, very wrong. It should not be condoned in a democracy. But we're discussing democracy. So many things are wrong. We give immunity to our governors. When governors have immunity, what they do with that immunity sometimes is questionable. For example, installing snooping devices and looking at what their political opponents are doing. This is criminal. This is treason. And governors that do that should be stripped of their immunity and put in jail. Next, we're talking of security. When there is insecurity all around us, the law cannot be made to work when the law is disobeyed. When a government does not respect judgments, whether the judgment is right or not, government should respect it. You cannot sue government and look forward to being paid a judgment fee. Government can disregard and continue as if nothing happened. When a government refuses to respect court judgment, it is the foundation for anarchy. And of course, when the judiciary becomes compromised, the highest bidder takes judgment. What happens to the poor and people who are vulnerable in the society? So we are talking of a system that is faulty. When a system is faulty, things like the state taking over the management of telecommunications when they are not empowered, whether on a concurrent list or a non-concurrent list to do that, is recipe for anarchy. So let's look forward to a very sane society. But for now, these are things we have to deal with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chuks, are you there? You have the floor just for 30 seconds. Chuks? Okay, Dewale, you have the floor.
All right, thank you, Bukola. We had a question earlier about who regulates. 1 second while I try to track that question. Unfortunately, I've copied so many questions here, I can't catch that. But we've had good summaries from both from all of the panelists here. What we're looking at now is how do we fix this? There have been questions about, there have been comments about when it's in the interest of national security, or when the shutdowns are said to be in the interest of national security, what then can we do? Where there are no existing laws that say you have a right, what then can we do? I think that the most important thing is for us to keep engaging and engage, especially we're engaging here, all of us are non-state actors. We need to find ways to, in a mature manner, engage the state actors so that they're more educated about how these things would, how these internet shutdowns adversely affect us. We've heard comments from people who've experienced politically motivated national security, allegedly motivated internet shutdowns. And the consensus seems to be that the shutdowns have not actually solved the problems. The problems have already started. So better education on the side of users, responsible usage, as has been pointed out by several people, would be the starting point to removing these headaches that the government agencies do talk about. I see Reverend Sunday's hand is up. Before I hand the floor to Reverend Sunday, we've gone over by 20 minutes now, and I'm wondering how we deal with this. How do we take the conversation forward? Do we take the chat transcripts and continue on Telegram? Suggestions, please. But Reverend Sunday, over to you, sir.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Since we are over time, I think we should just try and end it, because if I say some more things, I'll provoke more discussions. So let me act responsibly in the interest of what we are preaching. Thank you.
So thank you, Reverend. And Chuks, last words before we end the meeting. Chuks, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you so much for having me, Tomiwa and Dewale. It's been a privilege to share thoughts with everyone and at least get to contribute to the discourse. Hopefully, looking forward to pushing the conversation further, probably on other platforms, and then maybe some other time too, we could have a webinar to talk about this. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you very much for being part of us. So, Dewale, vote of thanks. And of course, to everyone, the discussion continues on Telegram and on the Connect. Dewale, you have the floor to end the meeting.
Thank you very much, Bukola. Thank you, panelists. Thank you to everyone who's taking time off, even while you are busy planning your romantic surprises for St. Valentine's Day, as the news has said exists. I really appreciate you. I appreciate that it was very short notice and all of you made it. Please feel free to send us your feedback via info@isoc.ng or exco@isoc.ng. There's a Telegram group. I hope that we can take these conversations there like right away so that people can continue to engage. There are close to 300 people there too who would have all sorts of insights. I wish you all the best. Do enjoy the rest of your day. We'll keep the meeting for a couple of minutes for those who want to copy the text chat, because once we end the chat, then you don't have access to that text anymore. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Hello, Reverend, your hand is up.
We can help him put it down.